Okay, well, I think we'll get started. So good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Miles Price. I'm Planning Director at British Land, and I know that a lot of you will know me, but it's also great tonight to see that there's some new faces on the call and some new names. So that's really exciting. We're really pleased that you're able to join us tonight. Obviously, we'd like to be holding this in person, but for various reasons and restrictions, that's not been possible. And so we hope the format tonight works. And we appreciate any feedback that you might want to give at the end of the presentation and the conversation, the Q&A session, so that we can make these better for the future. Joining me tonight are Hugh and Alice from DP9, who are our planning advisors, and I know many of you will know them already, and also Alice Jenkins, who works for EQ Communications, who are our new communications advisors on the Canada Water Masterplan project. So tonight, next slide, please, Hugh. What we'd like to do is give you a quick update from the team. And in the next hour, we will explain what we've been doing to support the community through the COVID period. And also to explain, for those of you who are new to the Canada Water Masterplan project, what the master plan will deliver and some of the recent progress that we've been making on site, notably in the last year or so. And then Hugh and Alice will explain the planning permission we have and the process we have to go through to discharge the reserve matters to bring forward future buildings. And these are known as reserve matters applications. And like we did at the beginning of this process, when we started talking to the community about the outline application, and Hugh and myself held some workshop sessions on that, we thought that sort of capacity building and explaining how the planning process worked was very useful, and it was very well received. So we hope that tonight, by explaining what the reserve matters application process is, that will enable you to engage in more detail with us as the project progresses, both in the next few months as we come out and provide you with information about our next phase of the scheme, but also for the longer term, so that that conversation can be more meaningful and more in depth. So yes, we hope that will be helpful. Okay, so next slide, please. So the last 12 months have been particularly challenging for a lot of people, and we recognised that very early on. There was going to be a need to provide support to local residents and local organisations, and also to some of the businesses that existed already at Surrey Quay Shopping Centre and across the leisure park site. So to that end, we have provided a substantial amount of rent forgiveness and deferrals for retailers, charities and the independents that on the site. And we've also provided substantial financial contributions to some of the local community, charity and council arranged funds that have been set up to support people in the local community who have been experiencing hardship during the COVID period. And we hope that that has been helpful. We've also maintained support for local groups and charities and 10 residents associations on a number of the council estates around the area. We've provided, I think it was about 1,500 books to local primary schools and to children, including some iPads as well for some children in local primary schools, to support them to do their schooling from home, and also just to keep them entertained and to continue with their education, because we know that that has also been a challenge for a number of families during the COVID period. In addition to that, we've also maintained our regular contact with our long-term local partners, of which there are many now, because we have been very active in the local area for a very long time now, and we've built some very long-term and meaningful partnerships with a range of organisations, charities and groups in the local area. And we've continued to maintain news feeds and news updates on our websites and our social media platforms. Next slide, please. So I know tonight there are a number of people on the webinar who haven't engaged in the master plan before, and so forgive me for those of you that are very familiar with the content of the Canada Water Masterplan, but I thought it'd be helpful just to explain very quickly what the master plan will deliver. The master plan, for those of you that aren't aware, is the area that sits in the blue on the aerial photograph to the right. And that includes the land that is currently the Surrey Quay Shopping Centre, the Surrey Quays Leisure Park site, and the old Daily Mail Printworks site. And there's also a site to the north of that called K1 in our parlance, which is one of the first phase buildings to come forward, which will deliver 79 affordable homes, and that will start on site shortly. But that is the extent of the Canada Water site. Within that, we propose, and I will run just briefly through some of the points on the left hand of the screen, but in essence, it's a mixed-use new town centre. It's got policy support in the London Plan, where it's designated as the Canada Water Opportunity Area, and also is covered by the Canada Water Area Action Plan, which has been in place since 2015. Within this blue space, we have now got permission to deliver a mixed-use town centre, and that will include approximately 3,000 new homes with a range of tenures, including 35% of those units being affordable homes with various tenures. We also provide a significant proportion of new urban spaces, open spaces, green spaces, parks, town squares, a range of new shops, restaurants, leisure, cultural, entertainment, community spaces, as you'd expect in a town centre and a project of this scale. And in addition to that, the green and blue elements of the project, we will be enhancing significantly the Canada Water dock, because as you will be familiar with, the wetland habitat that exists there at the moment on the Deal Porters side of the shopping centre car park side of the dock, that is actually quite neglected. It's dried out. It doesn't really serve the purpose that it was designed to do. And whilst there are birds and sort of habitats nesting in there at the moment, and it's fantastic to see the cygnets on the dock, it could be better. And so we've been working with the London Wildlife Trust to design a new wetland habitat within the dock, which will form part of the first phase of the master plan as we're bringing forward at the moment. We also provide a range of transport improvements. We will be providing a new station entrance at Surrey Quay Station on the north side of Lower Road, and we'll also be providing improvements and additional staff at Canada Water Station. In addition to that, we'll also be providing new bus routes, new cycle routes, about £7 million of highway improvements, and a whole range of new streets and public spaces that you would expect, primarily to try and break up the grain of this area, because for a very long time, a lot of this area has been not accessible to the community because there have been large blocks of buildings and fenced off areas that haven't been open to the public. And so by delivering this through the master plan, we will increase the permeability of the area, providing new links and connections into the existing and surrounding areas. And then also a big component of the project is obviously a substantial amount of office space. And over the next sort of 12 to 15 years, as we build those buildings out, we expect the population actually, well, the workforce working on the site to grow to around about 20,000 people. And hopefully that will provide jobs and opportunities for local businesses, but also local residents to gain employment in those buildings and in the new town centre itself. We'll also be providing a new leisure centre, and that is to replace the Seven Islands Leisure Centre, which is currently on Lower Road. That will sit in the basement and ground floor of the building, which we call A2, and I'll show you that in a minute. And that we hope will be open in the next 3 to 4 years. And then also we provide a range of community facilities and space for health centres, sixth forms, and funding for local primary schools. Next slide, please. These images just give you a flavour of the quality of the new place that we're hoping that together we can deliver. So on the left, you have the courtyard that sits within the dock offices, and they're quite unrecognisable spaces as you look at them like this on the screen, but there will be amazing spaces in the future. This courtyard sits behind the new A1 building, and also will provide a nice place for people to wait whilst they're either wait, but also to enjoy the cafes and the bars and the other facilities that will be on the ground floor of A1, but also will allow people to engage with the leisure centre, the entrance of which is just off to the north of the image, underneath on the ground floor of building A2. On the right hand side, you see an image of the town square. This also shows you the location of the new Tesco's store. You can just see that to the north of the image. And that is a replacement for the existing Tesco's store, which sits in the Surrey Quay Shopping Centre at the moment. That is on the other side of Surrey Quays Road, sitting in the leisure park site as we know it today. Next slide, please. So The last 12 months or so has been really busy. Nearly a year to the day, we got our planning permission issued by Southwark Council on the 29th of May. And since then, we've been very busy. We've drawn down the 500-year head lease of the master plan site from Southwark Council. You'll have seen, because of the activity on site, that we started the enabling works and the preparatory construction works. And we are apologetic for the disruption that is causing. We know that some of our neighbours are more affected than others, and we're doing what we can to try and minimise that impact through the course of the works. And we'll be more than happy to talk to you if you are directly affected by those works, and we have people that you can speak to so that we can address those concerns that you may have. We're also aware that for the existing shoppers and users of the leisure park site, that some of these works may be disruptive, and that your arrival experience when you're coming to shop at Surrey Quay Shopping Centre will change. And so we will try our best to make the signage and the routes from the surrounding streets into the car park as easy, as intuitive and as legible as possible, because we don't want to affect the experience that you have when shopping at Surrey Quays. We're keen to retain you as customers, and that your local shopping centre remains the place that you want to come to shop. We've also managed to provide a number of jobs and work for local people from the SE16 area, even in just these first few phases of the development. We have got 6 people who are residents in the immediate surrounding area of the site, now working with contractors, with Mace, with Keltbray, with Geldris on site today. And that's fantastic, because it's demonstrating very early on that we can have a very positive impact as a result of the works that we're bringing forward. And we hope that as we move into the larger construction phases of the project, that more and more people will be able to gain employment with the contractors. And just to say at that point, also in July, when there's the Rotherhithe Festival, a number of the contractors will be available to talk to if you are interested in a career in construction. And there will be people that you can talk to at the festival to talk about opportunities for gaining employment, either with those contractors directly or on the Canada Water Masterplan project. We've also started discharging the Section 106 obligations and the conditions that we need to start the Phase 1 buildings. A number of those are already discharged, and some of those are still with Southwark at the moment for discharging. That will allow us then to start on the A1, A2 and K1 buildings towards the early autumn, late summer, early autumn of this year. And so you can see the enabling works happening on site. That is just getting the ground ready, putting utilities in, enabling us to start work in earnest in building those buildings from the end of the summer. You'll also have noticed that we've been quite active in other parts of the site, and we've been very active over by the print works on Quebec Way. We've demolished the old wheel store buildings, and we've also done some groundworks there to allow us to bring forward the new Teddy London campus. And you'll see that some of those modular buildings are now in situ and they're being fitted out, getting ready for the students to arrive in September of this year. And it's very, very exciting. For those of you who don't know, Teddy London is a new university that's been set up as an alliance between the University of New South Wales in Sydney, the Arizona State University in America, and King's College, and is focused on engineering. It's very exciting. There's about 150 students starting in September. And if any of you know of anybody, or even yourself, are interested in a career or learning in the engineering field, then please do get in touch with Teddy, because they would love to talk to you. We've also started refurbishing the listed dock office, and you'll have seen that some of the hoardings and the exterior cladding has started to come down. That's really exciting. We hope to open that in mid-June, and that will become the project hub for a number of Canada Water Masterplan team members, including myself, which will mean that we're on site. We can monitor what's going on site a lot more easily, and we can also have easier conversations with people in the community, and you can come and talk to us so that it's more interactive and you know where to find us. We've also been working with Southwark Council and with Art Invest, the owners of the site, the old cellar site, to provide the Southwark Construction Skills Centre, and that should be opening shortly. Planning permission was secured for that last week, and the works are going to be starting very soon to fit that out and to get that ready for John and his team to start training local people in the skills needed to gain employment in the construction industry, which is really exciting again. We've also consciously planted 48 new trees in the local area. We're aware that obviously we've had to chop down a number of trees locally to start the construction works, and it was appropriate that we started to replace those as quickly as possible. And so, working with Southwark Council, you'll have seen a range of new trees being planted in the 3 wards around the site: Surrey Docks Ward, in Rotherhithe Ward, and in North Bermondsey. And we hope they start to make a very positive contribution to the local environment in which you live, and hopefully in your streets. We've also planted some new trees on site as well around the dock office, some very large trees, and hopefully they will bed in and provide a beautiful environment for that new courtyard that I showed you earlier. And in addition to that, we've also started work on the next phase of buildings in terms of the pre-application discussions that we have with Southwark Council, with the planning team. And we are currently working on, in our parlance, buildings in Zone L, Zone H, Zone G, Zone F, and Canada Water Dock. And when Hugh and Alice take you through what a reserve matters process is, you will see that there are zones illustrated within the master plan. And so hopefully over time you'll become familiar with the terminology that we use, so that it becomes clearer where the plots actually are located. So it's been a busy period, and this summer we will crack on. We will start constructing the first new building. The temporary campus for Teddy will complete, and we'll start engaging on the next phases of development. Next slide, please. And when I say we're going to start engaging on the next phases, what that means is that there are 4 likely engagement events that we would like to have with the community in the summer and in the autumn. If I take them clockwise from sort of 11 o'clock, we will be consulting with local residents and key stakeholders on our proposals for the dock. I've also already mentioned the fact that we'd like to enhance the sink and the wetland habitats in the dock, and that will also include the designs for a new bridge and the measures that we'll take to address the water levels within the dock. And so that consultation process will also be starting in summer. If I then go to sort of 1 o'clock, we are proposing a new scheme of residential buildings in Zone L. That will be a mix of private and affordable homes, and we will also be engaging on that in the summer. If I come to sort of 5 o'clock, so this is a proposal that we have for repurposing the Printworks site. That is going to convert to a predominantly office environment with retail and leisure within it, some of which will be facing onto the new park, which sits in the space currently occupied by the warehouse buildings that butt the side of the Printworks. But in the early summer, not too far away now, we will be coming out to you to talk to you about that, the proposal for that building, which has been designed by Hawkins Brown. And then to complete, as we come around to sort of 7 o'clock, we will also be coming to talk to you about the proposals that we have for Zone F, which sits in the centre of the site, and that is a predominantly residential and commercial project with some retail and leisure in it, and that is also something that we'd like to come and talk to you about later in the year, in the autumn. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'll hand over to Hugh and Alice, who will take you through what we've got permission for and explain to you what a Reserve Matters application is. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Miles. So my name's Hugh Sowerby, and I've been advising with Alice on the master plan for probably 5+ years now, so we know it quite well, and I know a number of you that are on the call. Just the first slide, I'm just going to go through what we've actually got planning permission for, because so we're coming out for, after a long prolonged period of consultation, 3+ years of consultation, we're now coming back with more consultation. And the reason for that is we got what's referred to as a hybrid planning permission in May last year. So parts of it were in detail, and that's to say we provided all of the details that we needed to ultimately build out. And you can see on the screen there that these are plots A1 A2 and K1 at the top right. And then the rest of the master plan area identified in orange was outline planning permission. And what that means is we've got permission for the general principle of what we're looking to bring forward, but we need to bring forward reserve matters applications to provide the missing information that we didn't know at the time. And it's no surprise really with a scheme that's going to be developed over 10 to 15 years that British Land didn't know exactly how it was going to be built out. Hence the inherent flexibility in this hybrid permission. So just going through the description of development. So this is what is on the decision notice for the master plan. There are 4 elements to it. The one highlighted in yellow at the moment is what we've got outline permission for. And you'll see there isn't a huge amount of detail there. What it says is we have outline permission with all matters reserved for a number of buildings, which could bring forward a number of different uses. And we have permission to demolish all of the buildings on site, or indeed retain some of those buildings. And that's the outline element. And then the next parts are the detailed elements, and you'll see there's a lot more information in that description. So A1, we know it's going to be 186 new homes, and we know it's going to be 6 stories and 34 stories. And you can see the image there on the right. Similarly with A2, we know it's a 4, 5 and 6 story block. We know it's delivering a new public leisure centre, and we know it's going to be providing retail and office uses. And then K1 is the detailed plot near Roberts Close, which is delivering 79 residential units. So ultimately, each reserve matters application we make will be turning the outline description of development into a more detailed description of development. I haven't got an image of the interim petrol station, but if you are to pop down to site, you'll see it because it's due to open next week, I believe. Now, as part of the outline element of the planning permission, there are a number of control documents. And what these do are they set the rules for development and for the reserve matters as and when we submit them. And the purpose is for the council to assess our scheme against these control documents to make sure we're not doing anything outside of the parameters that we've already agreed. And I've got examples of each of the 3, but we've got a development specification. And in very simple terms, that provides a limit on the square meters of development that we can deliver on the site, the square meters of gross external area of development. And we can't go above that hard cap. The parameter plans are as they sound. They are plans that set out limits of deviation and areas within the site that we can develop. And then the design guidelines, both for the master plan and for the public realm, it's a very large document which sets out all of the rules of how the building should come forward in terms of their appearance, in terms of important elements of them, anything that we thought was important at the time, anything that the council thought was important at the time, and anything that wasn't included in policy has found their way into these design guidelines. And they were subject to a huge amount of discussion with officers as part of the application process, and also subject to detailed public consultation. So I'm just going to take you through a couple of the examples of the parameter plans. So the first one is the site plan. So the area outlined in red is the area to which we have planning permission. You can just see the area in blue. That is the existing dock offices, which isn't part of our outline permission, but it is owned by British Land. This plan just simply says that we can demolish everything on site. We have permission to demolish all of the buildings, but you'll see the one in darker grey up at the top is we have permission to retain that building or demolish it, depending on what British Land decide to do moving forward. And this is probably one of the most important plans. So what this does is it sets out the minimum extent of public realm. So anything you can see in orange has to be delivered as public realm, whether it be landscaped, whether it be a new town square, whether it be the new park, or whether it be new roads or routes through the site. So we cannot build on those on the orange areas. The green areas, and we'll come back to this, these are the zones that Miles was referring to. We've got B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. They are what are called development plots. and we can build in those subject to the other controls in the permission. And you may see just the hatched lines going through some of the development plots. What that says is we must have a route through those plots, but at the moment we don't know exactly where that route's going to go. So it must follow that line, but there's a limit of deviation between the routes. This is important to the transport planners outside, but between you, it shows where we can service plots from. In simple terms, the darker purple means no servicing can take place from this location, and the orange thinner line is servicing can take place from this location. That's not to say that servicing will take place from all of those locations. It's just the locations that in due course we may determine are appropriate. And this is probably the other key plan which sets out the heights across the master plan. As a broad summary, the darker the colour, the higher we can go, and there's written dimensions on this plan as well. So you can see there are a number of very small dark squares, which are our tall buildings, but you can see it's a very limited amount of deviation within that box. So that's where we know the tall buildings will go. Now this is the development specification. It looks very complicated, but I can assure you it's not. What this does is sets out how much floor space we can deliver in any particular zone. So they're the B's, C, D's and E's that Miles referred to, and any particular use. So whether it's retail, office, leisure. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but hopefully you can. But from top to bottom, there are a number of columns which set out the areas within a particular zone. And then there are a number of rows that set out the amount of areas of a particular use. If you were to total anything up on the row, it would be far in excess of the bold number on the right hand side, and the same as all of the numbers in a column are in far excess of the bold number below it. That's because there is inherent flexibility in the development specification. Notwithstanding that, what we are not able to do is deliver more than the bottom left figure of 656,200 square meters. So irrespective of how we bring forward development across the site, whether we bring forward more residential than we anticipated or whether we bring forward less residential than we anticipated, we can't deliver more than this global figure. And that's quite important for reasons I'll come on to. And then lastly, it's difficult to go through these because they are so detailed, but these are the design guidelines. So as I say, anything important has been included in here. This is specifically in relation to the print works. At the bottom, on the right-hand side, at the top, it's showing that there are a number of key access points. It's also dedicating a route through the print works. The bottom two talk about how you express the design of the print works in a horizontal form, but also providing some sort of structural grid to the facade. So they're quite detailed, important points, but these will become more relevant as we bring forward a reserve matters application for a particular site. And then the role of the Illustrative Master Plan. For those that attended the public consultation exercises, you will have seen the model, the large model that we had in the centre of the room. And that modelled the Illustrative Master Plan, which was the vehicle for consensus for testing purposes. It also represented how we best thought and best think development will come forward across the master plan. So it was our interpretation at the time of the parameter plans, of the development specification and of the design guidelines, and then linked to what we thought the market was doing. And unsurprisingly, the market has changed significantly in the past 12 months as a result of the pandemic. But this is the role of the Illustrative Master Plan. So on the left-hand side is an image of the heights parameters plan. And it's an extruded jelly mold of the area within which we can bring forward buildings. However, when you bring in the development specification, which caps the amount of area to 650,000 square meters, The actual area within this jelly mould is almost twice that. So we cannot deliver buildings to this full jelly mould. So the Illustrative Master Plan takes that area, takes all of the briefs, all of the visions, takes all of the parameter plans, takes all of the design codes, and comes up with what we think is one interpretation of what could come forward. This series of diagrams show how the parameter plans and the development specification and the design guidelines are all interpreted alongside along the design process to come up with a particular scheme. So number one at the top left, hopefully you can see my cursor, is showing the development zones. Number two in the middle at the top is showing building lines. So whilst we have a development zone, some zones will have a building line which pulls away from certain sensitive uses. I'm thinking Hoffield Place in this instance, or along Redriff Road. Others we can build out to the full extent of the building line. And then on the top right, it's the proposed maximum heights, which is the full jelly mould, but of course we can't deliver to that full extent. And then the bottom three are the impact of the design guidelines. So number four, we're showing the design guideline ensures that we have a route through this building. So we have to place a route through there. Number five shows the development specification. Okay, we've got this jelly mould, that's all well and good, but you can't actually provide that much area. The development specification caps you in certain places. And then you can see at the bottom right how it relates to the Illustrative Master Plan. And we expect that it will be broadly similar, but there will be some instances where it is very different to the Illustrative Master Plan. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Alice, who's going to go through what the reserve matters applications are.
Good evening, everyone. So Hugh's talked you through what has already been secured under the outline permission. I'm going to briefly explain what the reserve matters are. Next slide, please. Thanks. So an outline permission establishes the general principles of a development, such as the scale and nature of it. But an outline permission is subject to the approval of further details, which are known as reserve matters. And there are 5 reserve matters. These are layout, access, scale, appearance, and landscaping. So reserve matters could be submitted individually, or they could be submitted all together. So you might see an application which includes details for any one of the reserve matters, or all 5, or anything in between. But of course, a scheme can only be built out until all 5 of those reserve matters are approved and any relevant conditions are discharged. Goes without saying that obviously our reserve matters applications will need to cover all parts of the site, including buildings, public realm, and infrastructure such as roads. So the first reserve matter, layout, as Hugh's already described, an outline permission secures approval for development zones rather than the individual buildings themselves. So we will therefore need to come forward with details of layout, which includes how each individual building within a development zone is arranged around the network of streets and spaces that are established by the outline permission. Next slide, please. The next reserve matter is access, which means how various users of the building or piece of public realm will access the site. This includes access for vehicles, so for example, servicing and delivery vehicles or refuse vehicles or residence cars, as well as cyclists and pedestrians. We would need to provide details of routes into and out of the buildings or piece of public realm and show how these routes are going to link into the existing network of surrounding streets and spaces. We'd also need to demonstrate inclusive access, so demonstrate how those with differing mobility needs might access a space or building. Next slide, please, Hugh. Scale. So as Hugh's already mentioned, under the outline permission, the maximum height and massing parameters have been established, but we would still need to come forward with details of the precise massing for each individual building. So very simply put, this is the height, width and length of each building. Next slide, please. Appearance, this is very self-explanatory. What's the building going to look like? This needs to include details of external facing materials, architectural detailing, and demonstrate the appearance of the building. Next slide, please. And the final reserve matter is landscaping. So again, it's fairly self-explanatory. It's how the streets and spaces around each building will be treated. So it should include details of tree planting, hard landscaping, soft landscaping, etc. I'll hand back to Hugh because I think you're going to talk through the reserve matters process.
Thanks, Alice. So the reserve matters process, this includes the process that we'll undertake with the design team, but also the consultation process that this forms part of. So it's not dissimilar to the process that one would undertake for a full planning permission, albeit we are obviously working within the parameters that have already been established with the permission, and we are obviously only providing the details that we now need to, that Alice has just gone through. But the start of the process is to get the architect and the design team up to speed and to set a brief and a vision for the particular plot. And then we will engage in pre-application discussions with the council. Once we've got through a period of pre-app engagement, we'll start the sharing of information publicly, which will include preparing some information boards and potentially holding a public exhibition or sending around a newsletter. And Mars will go through that in a bit more detail. We'll then prepare information for submission to the council, and then a reserve matters application is dealt with by the council in much the same way a full planning application is. We will submit it, it will be validated, there will be a period of statutory public consultation. The officers will then review any consultation responses. They will ultimately draft their report, and the report will be considered at planning committee, and the planning committee can then choose to approve or refuse the application. The only slight nuance between this and a full large application is the involvement in the GLA. The GLA don't have to write a stage one, what's referred to as a stage one report, or indeed a stage two report. The ultimate decision body will remain the local authority. And at this point, I'll hand over to Miles to take you through some of the commitments.
Thanks, Hugh. Thanks, Alice. So, as many of you know, we've sought to engage as widely as possible. We've had a motto of talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime, and hopefully you felt that we've lived up to that during the 4 years that we were engaging with people in the run-up to the master plan being submitted for planning, and then during that sort of determination period. And we intend to continue that philosophy as we move into the reserve matters process. Our engagement on the RMAs will, be guided by a range of principles, but we thought it was helpful just to make those public, to be as transparent as possible about the thinking that we put into it, and also the process that we would like to go through with the community when we come forward with an RMA application. So obviously we'll build upon all of the thousands of comments that we've received to date from 2014 through the various stages of the engagement that we've had to date. We will always engage well in advance of submitting an RMA. We would like to do that in person where possible, because we think that's the best way to engage. It allows us to have a better conversations. And we will also supplement that with the various digital channels that are available to be used. And those are increasing all the time as new technology comes out. You will have seen the virtual exhibitions that we did for the substation and for Teddy London during last year. And we hope that you found that usable and interactive. We didn't have any negative feedback on that approach. So that is how we're intending to do some of the first RMA engagement exercises in the summer, because the COVID rules we don't believe will have been relaxed in time for us to actually hold physical sessions. But we will aim to have the physical sessions in the autumn if the COVID rules allow us to do that. And we really genuinely strive to reach as many people across the community as we can. And we would always welcome your suggestions about how we can do more to reach more people in the community. And so your feedback and that sort of two-way dialogue about how we might do that is something that our ears are always open to, and we'd welcome your thoughts on that. If there are various groups or societies or networks that you're aware of within the local area that maybe we're not plugged into or know about, then please make us aware of them, and we'll add those to either our mailing lists or we'll reach out directly to them, and we'll have one-on-one conversations with those groups. Next slide, please. So in terms of how we will engage and how we will share that information, the way it works is that once we've decided to bring forward a new RMA, so once we've decided that we want to bring forward a new building or an application that merits an RMA, a reserve matters application in its own right, then internally we prepare what we call an engagement plan. And that sets out how it is that we will take forward engagement on that particular project, on that particular building. That engagement plan is then sent to the planners at Southwark Council for their consideration. And we have that dialogue just to make sure that they're happy with what we're proposing. In addition to that, we have to tailor the RMA and the building in question and the type of engagement exercise that we undertake, because the RMAs will differ hugely in their content, in their scale, in their direct impact on local residents, because some of them are in the centre of the site and have no direct neighbours. Some of them sit on the outside of the site and have direct impacts on the immediate neighbouring community across the street. And so we need to tailor our engagement plans to be sensitive to that. And that is something that we will definitely strive to do and we'll commit to do. We use a range of digital channels and digital mediums. We've got our Twitter account, we've got our Instagram, we've got our Facebook, we've got our website. And as new digital tools and new digital platforms become available, we'll also explore those to see if that allows us to reach more people. But equally, we're aware that there's also about 30% of the local community that don't have access to the internet. And so it remains vital that we use things other than digital to engage, which is why our preference would always be physical. But we will also endeavour to send out newsletters. We will have those one-on-one drop-in meetings or direct neighbour sessions where you have adjoining neighbours to the plot. That is the subject of the RMA. And we'll also have more broad, sort of more general community drop-in meetings as well, where relevant. And also seek to attend and continue to attend the various forums and community meetings that already exist in the area. As you'll know, I attend many ward panel meetings, many neighbour meetings, and many police panel meetings, many TRA meetings, the Canada Water Consultative Forum meetings, the whole range of meetings that we are aware of. If more exist and you would like us to attend to update you, then please get in touch, please let us know, and we will see whether or not a member of the team can come down and talk to you about our proposals. Thanks you. So now we'd like to hand it over to Q&A session. And I know some of you have been sending questions in already, and Alice at EQ will be able to provide us with those questions and to point them at relevant members of the panel. If we don't know the answer, then please ask your question in the comments section on the form that will accompany the end of this presentation, and we will endeavour to get back to you. So Alice, over to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Miles, and good evening, everyone. We've got a number of questions and I'm very aware we've only got 15 minutes to answer them. If your question isn't answered this evening, there will be a feedback form at the end. Please do include it and we will make sure that we get a response to you. But without further ado, there have been a number of questions about the trees in the local area. Some people have noticed that they've been cut down recently, and there's also been more broad questions about the ecological impact and the cumulative ecological impact of the site. Miles, I wondered if you might be able, with help from others, to give a bit of an overview as to what's going on and what the benefits and constraints are on the site with regards to ecology.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you for those questions. Yeah, we're very aware of the sensitivity around trees and the loss of trees on the site. You know, as you know, we see the discussions that are happening on social media and we try and support those conversations where we can with giving you an insight into what it is that we're thinking about our tree strategy for the proposals. As you will be aware, it is not technically, practically possible to build a new town centre without taking down some of the trees that exist on the site today. And we've gone through at some length with the design team and with the urban foresters and the tree officers at Southwark Council to find ways in which we can protect and retain as many trees as possible on the site. We have agreed with the council as to which trees will be lost and which trees will be retained on the project. And that information is available through the submissions we made at planning and also through the Section 106 agreement that we've entered into with Southwark Council. We are conscious that we've dropped down some trees that are have been classified as special by some people. Whilst they may be special to some, they are maybe not designated technically as high quality trees. And so there's always going to be a tension about the visual amenity of a tree and its actual health and its classification in the sort of true technical sense. But we will endeavour to plant trees as quickly as possible when it is permissible to do so within the development plots that we are working on. And to that end, as you will have seen, whilst we've removed some trees in the dock office courtyard, we have recently planted 2 very large specimen trees. We've also, as I alluded to earlier, also planted 48 additional heavy, they call them heavy standard trees. So they're not saplings, they are sizable trees in their own right. And we hope they will grow quickly and that they've been planted and they will be maintained by Southwark Council in the off-site sense, so that they are able to flourish as quickly as possible and mature as quickly as possible. We have to develop a tree strategy, and it's the intention that tree strategy will shortly be submitted to Southwark Council for approval. That tree strategy sets out what our vision for trees on the site will be. In the Section 106 agreement, we are required to plant around about 1,200 new trees, either on-site or off-site in the surrounding area. And it specifies the hierarchy of planting locations and where it is permissible to plant trees and what trees we should be planting. I think it's around about, it is 1,200 trees that we'll be looking to replant across the site. But we've been more than happy to have further conversations with individual groups that are interested in the tree topic.
Miles, the only thing I'd add just to that is it's not just about the numbers. So obviously the numbers are an important part of it, but the Section 106 agreement requires us to replace canopy cover. So us chopping down one large tree doesn't mean we can replace it with one small tree. So ultimately we will have to report back. I can't remember if it's on an annual basis, but it's on a regular basis as we're delivering the scheme.
Every 4 years. Every
4 years, thanks Miles. The canopy cover, and we need to get back to and beyond the existing canopy cover on the site, or I should say the canopy cover that was on the site when we got planning permission, because we've since lost some trees.
That's great, thank you very much. So the next one is with regards to the interim petrol filling station. That's obviously very obvious as you're sort of in the area, and we've had a number of questions asking whether or not you can sort of expand on why Tesco, the Tesco filling station has moved and been relocated next to the docks. It was surprising that there wasn't any electric car charging points, or sort of sustainable materials, and if there's a reason for that. And they understand that it's a temporary build. How long is it going to be there for? And also, how long will the interim petrol filling station remain open, and why it's needed?
Okay, I'll take that question. That's absolutely fine. So why was it relocated? Well, it's been relocated because it sits in the site of our building A2. And the reason we're doing A1 and A2 first is because we wanted to have that arrival experience as you come out of Canada Water Station. We wanted the town centre to commence at that point in terms of the new phases of the development that we wanted to bring on the site. It was a part of the site that was possible to develop because being a car park, it wasn't, there was no need to relocate anybody. There was nobody going to be disturbed by it in terms of businesses on the site today. We recognise, obviously, it's adjacent to Hothfield Place and the residents there, and we've been engaged in extensive conversations with the residents there about how we build the buildings to minimise the impacts on those residents. But we had to move it so that we could build A2 and to provide the new leisure centre for Southwark Council and for the community, and the office building above. The actual specification of the new petrol station was down to Tesco's. It is a Tesco's facility, it's run and managed by them. So we didn't have a say in the specification of the PFS. They may decide to introduce charging points in the future, but it would be their decision to do that if they so choose. And it's probably of interest to people to know that in the construction of the petrol station, Keltbray have actually used earth-friendly concrete. And what that's meant is it's actually saved 240 tonnes of carbon emissions, which is the first time we believe it's been used, certainly in London. And that aligns with our sort of plans to transform our portfolio of buildings to be as carbon friendly as possible, and to try and hit the net zero carbon by 2030. In terms of its longevity, that's still to be decided. At the moment, it still remains interim, but those plans may change in the future. But at the moment, those will be for discussion with Tesco's.
Thanks, Mark. We have also just had one other come in about the Tesco filling station, and how you're planning on addressing concerns around the proximity of it to nearby residences, with the increased noise, smell, and traffic in the proximity to the Surrey Quays Overground station.
Right. Okay. Well, the vapour extraction systems within the petrol station themselves are sort of cutting edge. They're market leading. So we would hope that the vapour issue would not be something that residents in the Osprey estate would experience. In terms of the extra traffic or movement to the petrol station, that traffic was already going to the shopping centre car park. It was already travelling in the local area, and so I wouldn't expect that its relocation would see an increase in the amount of trips that are coming to the site. So if that question has been raised by residents from the Osprey estate, then I'd be happy to talk to them offline about that, and to try and address any concerns or issues that they may have with that.
Lovely, thanks, Miles. The next topic we've had a number of questions on is with regards to retail. There are a number of people who would like to know whether or not there'll be a new shopping centre replacing the old one, and if they'll be able to access Tesco Surrey Quays Extra and Surrey Quays Shopping Centre throughout the regeneration project. If there'll be a lull in service provision. And on that theme with Tesco's, will vehicle access and parking on the current site be maintained while the new Tesco's is built?
Okay, very good questions. So if I take those in turn, so will there be a new shopping centre? It is not the intention to re-provide a covered shopping centre. That existing shopping centre will gradually be reduced in its scale as we build buildings over it. And the intent, the vision, is that the retail offer becomes more street-based, and that it is a more traditional urban retail experience, with a new high street down Deal Porter's Way, and then within the 16 streets that we create across the master plan, that those are faced by shops, restaurants, cafes, and leisure activity. So it'll feel more like a traditional town, a normal town centre in that regard. So no, the intention is not to provide a new covered shopping centre. In terms of will Tesco's remain open? Yes, the agreement we have entered into with Tesco's requires continuity of trade. So before the existing store is closed, we have to have built the new Tesco store, and it has to have been fitted out and has to be ready for trading before the old store can close. So there will always be a Tesco's facility operating at Canada Water. In terms of car parking, it's right to say that our focus is on sustainable travel. As part of the master plan, we are trying to reduce the number of car trips that are made to the area and to the site. We've got a big focus on walking, cycling and public transport. And over time, the amount of car parking spaces that are available on the site will reduce down. We will maintain a certain provision of car parking throughout, but at the end of the master plan, there will be 1,000 car parking spaces in the town centre, provided in a basement car park underneath the new Tesco store, and also, subject to demand, a new multi-storey car park between Surrey Quays Road and Deal Porters Way, potentially in Zone E, which is allowed for in the planning permission. But the intention is to substantially reduce the amount of car parking spaces, but to maintain some, because we recognise that for new town centres and for existing town centres, you need to be able to drive to the town centre to perform the various activities that you might have to do.
Thank you, Miles. We go on to a topic which you began the presentation on, actually, with regards to COVID and how COVID has changed the master plan and what you're looking at delivering. Do you foresee less demand for office space and housing? Have you revised the need for offices? The plan looked like it was originally expecting a substantial volume of office space on the site. Do you think that this will change and the final mix will be altered as a result? Do you have any sort of more general thoughts on COVID, Miles, as well, how it's impacted?
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. So in terms of the impact on the master plan and the vision that we've got for the town centre, I don't think it's substantially changed it. We're still very confident in London, and the London market has been a very strong location for commercial office space. And even today, across London, we're having many conversations with new occupiers of our space and people that are interested in taking space, but also in moving into new buildings. So giving us the confidence to build new buildings. And you've seen that on other sites across London where we have recently commenced the development of new office buildings. So no, we're still confident in office as a product. But what we think, and the jury is still out to a large degree. I mean, the COVID situation is still settling and is still yet to resolve itself. So how people choose to change their lifestyles and how businesses choose to operate their space is still to be seen, and it will differ for different businesses and different people in different ways. But the key for us will be to make sure that our offices are designed in a way that is flexible and can respond to changes, both in occupier needs but also in the employee needs. And so that is something that we will continue to monitor. But in terms of the quantum of office space on the projects, we don't at the moment think that will be changing. We're still confident in the quantums and the vision that we hold for the new town centre.
And just to add that, Miles, I think certainly from what I've seen in advising on some of the emerging office schemes of Canada Water, the quantum of floor space hasn't changed, but the way that you're approaching the buildings, the health and well-being and the internal layout and the light that gets into them and how those buildings are going to be used, there has been a shift, I think, in approach over the past 12 months. I think it's probably just been a catalyst more than anything, because it seemed to be going that way in any event, but it certainly seemed to have sped it up.
Yeah, that's right. And it's about the flexibility of space. It's about how we design it, but also making the buildings more sustainable. We know from talking to the people that want to move into these buildings to take space, to take leases of large amounts of commercial space, that it's really important for staff retention that they are operating and working in the healthiest buildings possible. And so that's something we're also very focused on, and we're very fortunate at British Land to be able to bring in the world's best architects and the world's best engineers and sustainability advisors to ensure that happens.
Thank you, Miles. It's 8 o'clock, but I know the team are very happy to stay on for another 10 minutes to try and answer a few more questions. If people want to leave now, that's fine, but we'll try and answer as many questions as we can. There's quite a number of questions that come in with regards to sustainability. In addressing the climate change issues, are you having an integrated energy plan for the entire site? For example, are you installing 3,000 gas boilers, electric charging vehicles? And could you give an overview of just the general sustainability plans for the site, if that's possible?
Yeah, sure. So British Land has just recently launched its sustainability vision for 2030. which is trying to achieve net zero across our campuses and our developments and our portfolio by 2030, which is something that we're very committed to as a business. We will try as much as we can to reduce the embodied carbon in the design of our developments and also the carbon in the operation of our buildings. On Canada Water, we've got an all-electric focus in terms of the energy strategy. So we will be focusing on air source and ground source heat pumps, some photovoltaic cells where relevant. They often give you what you might expect from the amount of land that they take. We will be bringing forward extremely green buildings. So we'll be seeking BREEAM Excellent, WELL standard, LEED standards that are exemplary and place us at the cutting edge and give us a competitive edge against other people in London who are building office schemes and other commercial schemes at the same time. You know, we'll be providing the usual things like the green and brown roofs, the sustainable urban drainage systems, the increased insulation, the LED lighting, the heat recovery systems, all of the things that you would expect from a very responsible developer like British Land. We will also be targeting a significant increase in biodiversity across the site and ecology across the site, targeting urban greening factors, biodiversity net gain. We're working with the London Wildlife Trust to support us in that regard. We have a lot of green spaces in the master plan. We have the new 3.5 acre park. We have Park Walk, all of which provide sort of stepping stones between Russia Dock Woodland and Southwark Park. And we're really keen to make our contribution to that, to support the increased ecology and biodiversity across the site, including the work that we'll be doing to Canada Water Dock. So there's a lot we're doing, and we will be explaining more of that on our various channels in the coming weeks and months ahead.
I'll just add one thing, Miles, just to say that we were asked a question at Planning Committee, actually, what our energy strategy was for the site. And we have some broad ideas and some broad direction, but I think we're very keen not to be tied to one particular strategy because the whole process is changing so rapidly. So we are required to review our energy strategy on a regular basis with the council and respond to emerging technologies. And certainly on one of the schemes that we got detailed planning permission for, that energy strategy did change over the course of the pre-app discussions because it changed from a gas boiler option or backup gas boilers to the all electric. So it is an emerging beast, I'd say.
That's right. And we're also designing the estate so that it can be connected to the district heat network in the future if that proves to be a viable thing to do.
Or indeed interrelated buildings working together to have a similar sort of effect.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you. We've had some questions in about antisocial behaviour and in particular around Deal Porter Square. There's understanding that British Land are taking over responsibility for Deal Porter Square. Are there any plans at the moment as to how it's going to be repurposed and any changes to the square? And if there, because at the moment it's a magnet for antisocial behaviour and I think there are some hopes for improvement, Miles.
Okay, yeah. Well, it is still Southwark Square. It's still adopted highway. But British Land have taken on the management and cleaning responsibility for that space. And the reason for doing that was because we thought that it would be a good idea if we tried to incorporate some of our enlivenment and other activity ideas that we have for the land that we own on the master plan site into surrounding areas which might also benefit local residents. And so we'd like to have a conversation with the community about the sorts of things they'd like to see happen on the plaza, on Deal Porter Square. But in the short term, there's no physical changes that are planned to that, and our teams will be around there to assist in the maintenance and the cleaning of those spaces, just to maintain the standards that local residents obviously rightly expect.
Thank you. And because of the time, I think this is going to be our last question, but it's around transport. Obviously, you've mentioned earlier on about the 1,000 car parking spaces which will be provided as part of the scheme. Is there anything else with regards to transport that you might be able to expand on as to what's being provided and all as part of the master plan, Miles?
Yeah, of course. So transport was probably one of the biggest issues that we discussed with the community, and probably had raised most concerns by local residents about what the impact of the master plan would be on their day-to-day lives. And so we spent a lot of time working with Transport for London and with Southwark Council and other transport stakeholders to come up with a package that addressed the impacts that was forecast to happen from the master plan. That package was approved by Southwark Council, by Transport for London, and there were big discussions and scrutiny by members at Planning Committee about transport. In a high level, we provide contributions to improve Canada Water Station and to increase the staffing levels at Canada Water Station. We also will build with TfL a new station entrance at Surrey Quay Station. We also deliver 2 new bus routes. There's about £12 million that's been earmarked for the delivery of 2 new bus routes to connect the site with the Old Kent Road opportunity area, with Greenwich, with the City of London and other areas. So that's quite an exciting development, and they will come on stream as we reach certain levels of office space and homes. We also provide improvements to the cycle hire network. We'll be providing 6 new cycle docking stations, and we've recently agreed where some of those will be located with TfL. We're also aware that they're looking to introduce more quickly than that. Actually, there's been some recent additional investment to provide additional cycle hire expansion within the north of the borough. And we also provide a contribution to off-site highways improvements. And there are various measures that have been identified working with Southwark and with TfL that we can do as we reach certain levels of retail floor space in the local area. So there's a whole package of things, but as I say, the focus is on trying to achieve about 80% of all trips to the site by public transport. And we think that's a really important vision and a really important goal, and places this as a very sustainable project. Just one final point to make on that is that in terms of car parking, there will be no residential car parking or car parking for residential properties on the site, with the exception of spaces allocated for disabled users. And so we think that's really important. It's a lifestyle choice to come and live at Canada Water. And so you will know that if you move to Canada Water, you will not have a car parking space. You will have access to car clubs because we will provide special rates and special deals with car club operators, and we'll provide car club bays on street. But within the plots and within the residential buildings themselves, there won't be car parking spaces for residents. To make sure that those those residents don't sort of buy a car and then park it in the surrounding streets, we've thought of that, and we have provided contributions to Southwark to monitor local streets and the controlled parking zones in the area. And we will take steps to ensure that people don't park in the surrounding areas. It will not be possible for residents moving to Canada Water to have a CPZ permit for local streets. So it is a very strict policy that we will be enforcing. And as I say, there will be car parking for retailers and for leisure, but there won't be for the commercial office spaces and for the general residents.
Thank you very much indeed, Miles. And very finally, is there a plan yet for independent businesses to be able to lease a property on the new high street? How can residents find out about that, Miles?
Okay, well, as part of the planning permission, we are committed to provide about 7,000 square metres of affordable workspace, and also around about 5,000 square metres of affordable retail. And they will be provided at a discount to the current market rates, but the market rates at the time prevailing when we bring forward those units. And they will be for fixed terms, and it's possible to talk to us about that. And we will be interested to hear from anybody that is interested in taking space in one of our buildings in the future. What I would say, though, is that the first phase buildings, we already know what we will be doing with those retail and business units. And so it'd be for the next phase is probably in 3 to 4 years, where we'll be sort of able to have more serious conversations with people about taking space in some of those areas. I think that's probably all I can say on that for now, but the Section 106 agreement does set out very clearly what provision we have to make for affordable retail and affordable workspace. That's
lovely. Thank you very much indeed. We have done our very best to get through as many questions as have been submitted as possible. But again, a reminder, if you haven't had your question answered, please do either email your question to team@canadawatermasterplan.com or leave it in the feedback form that you'll have pop up as you leave the Zoom call. And I think, Miles, you just wanted to finish off.
Yeah, just to say to everybody that's stayed with us, and the numbers have remained high, so thank you very much for that. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. I hope that in due course we'll be able to meet personally. I was down on the Canada Water yesterday. I bumped into a number of people that I knew just walking around the area. I miss it. I want to get back to it in a more permanent way. And so for tonight, thank you for joining us. Thank you for asking some really interesting questions. And we look forward to getting back in touch with you very shortly about the engagement that we'll be doing on our reserve matters applications over the summer and in the early autumn. And I hope that the information that DP9, Alice and Hugh have provided you with tonight helps you understand what the RMAs are that we will be talking to you about in a few weeks' time. So thank you very much, everybody.